Hey there, folks. Before we begin, I would really appreciate it if you'd be willing to go search up the BIPOC Streamer Awards and cast your vote for the Chatterbox Award for the Winging It podcast, because we're up for it for this year, and we'd really like to potentially win that. So if you could do us a favor, head over there and make that vote for us, that would be highly appreciated. On with the discussion. Before the video gets started, the Game Idea Guide does not own any of the imagery used in today's video. It is the property of the IP holders and their subsidiaries. It is used in this video to flavor the experience and nothing more. Thank you very much and have an enjoyable time.
Do you enjoy the idea of taking your favorite characters from comic books, anime, games, manga, and bringing them together, joining them in harmony to create something beautiful and interesting in a gaming situation? Well, if you do, then you've come to the right place, my friend. Welcome to The Cross Zone.
Hey there, folks. Andre the Game Idea Guy here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Cross Zone. This time around, the crossover is going to be between the Mega Man X series and Casshern Sins. The name being X and Casshern Sins of the Father. For continuity placement for each of these IP, it takes place after Mega Man X5 and well before the events of Casshern Sins, the anime, and what is obviously an alternative timeline. In this scenario, the androids from Casshern would be classified as Reploids as they fit all of the requirements to be labeled as such based upon the Mega Man X lore. They would act as the replacement for the new generation Reploids from Mega Man X7 and 8, going from Reploids with the ability to replicate each other to Reploids with the potential to procreate, which was the purpose of the creation of Casshern, Dio, and Lita in the first place in their series. This also means that for this continuity, Axel wouldn't exist, at least not in the moment anyway. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I should get into how the game will play. In a general sense, it will control and operate very much like the Mega Man X series for those who are familiar, being sort of an action platformer, but with some Metroid-esque elements for how levels are handled, similar to how the first Mega Man Zero and the ZX games operate. So expect being able to dash, wall jump, and for each character to have a style of play that slightly differs beyond the basic character movements. For this game, there would be a good number of playable characters, even more that are important to the overall plot and story. So, let's get into the playable characters. Mega Man X, Zero, Alia, Casshern, Dio, and Lita. So for characters that have a high level of importance but they're not antagonists, Dr. Katora Azuma, Luna, Sigma as a virus, Cygnus, Douglas, and Liuz, if I'm saying that right. And for the enemies, these are characters that I can think of right away that would be able to hold some significance. Magma Dragoon, Double, Colonel, Iris, Vile, Mars, Vulcan, Nightmare Zero under special circumstances, Black Zero under special circumstances, Awakened Zero under special circumstances, Gate under special circumstances, Battle Armor Gate, Maddened Casshern under special circumstances, Jin, Sophita, Dynamo, and Breaking boss. So just a quick aside, because I don't have this in my scripting, but as I go further into it, I will describe the special circumstances that the characters have, certain situations that they're required to be for them to be fought. Because special circumstances means that you don't always have to take on that character, and you don't always have to have them available to fight. Some of those fights can be avoided, is all I'm saying. But as I get further along, you'll see it. These enemy characters will each have some significance to the story, especially in the case of the returning X4 Mavericks who would have been resurrected for this game. But we'll push that to the back burner for a little bit and deal with the playable characters. So for each of the characters, there are some specifics that I would like to get into. For X, he's obviously a long-range character who uses his buster with his basic shot, charged shot, and double charged shot, which he would have from the start. And we're talking base X, not with any armor. He gains boss enemy main weapons when he defeats them. He also gains armor upgrades from capsules. For Zero, he's a close range battler that uses his Z-Saber to hack and slash enemies with quick and powerful combos. He starts with his double jump, a buster that only does a full charge shot. He gains boss enemy skills when he defeats them. For Alia, she plays very similarly to X. She has a basic shot, a charged shot, and a basic energy shield she can use to absorb 3 points of damage. She gains boss enemy powers that can be used to enhance her energy shield. For Casshern, he's a close range character that can attack enemies and combos to stack damage. The final attack of his combo will temporarily stun enemies who are not destroyed. This does not work on bosses. And he creates shockwaves from his hands to attack enemies at a medium range. He learns a new technique with each boss enemy defeated. For Dio, it's very much the same as Casshern since they're twins, but instead of creating shockwaves with his hands when he attacks, Dio can drain enemies to boost his health. Again, this doesn't work on bosses. He gains the elemental power of boss enemies after defeating them. For Lita, she's a weapons specialist. She starts off the game with a medium range whip covered with thorns, which can swing and hit enemies and for multiple points of damage with a combo. She can swing her whip in multiple directions and use it to grab far off ledges or to pull herself to a wall. She gains a new handheld weapon each time she defeats a boss enemy. Each character has their standard basic attack, secondary attack, jump, dash, and air dash, as well as giga attack. For X, this depends on what armor he's wearing. Characters can enhance their abilities by rescuing different Reploids and augmenting them between levels. This applies to your max health, weapons, abilities, power, defense, movement, and other things. Rescued Reploids can also be found at Hunter HQ with intel on different bosses and their stages. Now to get to the important part of this discussion, the story outline. I don't always do them, but I do have a baseline that I think would help move things along, as well as some varying events that can happen that would create different outcomes. Mixing these characters already creates some potentially interesting scenarios. This game would follow a version of the Mega Man X story that combines Zero awakening due to the Sigma and Zero viruses infecting him, but he survives the situation and returns to normal while self-repairing. So similarly to Mega Man X6, you don't start the game with Zero available. And because I like the idea of the Zero virus running rampant after the big battle at the end of X5, the Zero Nightmare incident still takes place, with Hymax and Gate being swirled up in it. X heads out to investigate the crash site where the remnants of the space colony Eurasia has landed due to reports of high-level Maverick activity in the area. X then proceeds through the territory until he encounters a large junk Maverick. After defeating it, he battles Hymax, whom he can't damage at the moment. Partway through the fight, Gate and Breaking Boss show up and call Hymax off, with Breaking Boss intending to destroy a worn-down X with a highly concentrated blast. However, 3 new-gen Reploids step in and take the brunt of the attack while defending X. The 3 aggressors leave while X is distracted with taking his saviors to Hunter HQ to be repaired. X gives his report to Cygnus and Alia, while Douglas watches over the 3 unnamed Reploids that helped X as they recover. After learning about Gate being evolved this time around, Alia is prompted to join in the fight instead of just being a navigator, leaving that duty to Douglas. Being familiar with Gate, Alia would like to have the chance to speak with him, and taking on missions directly would be the best way for her to potentially do that. After 2 Mavericks are defeated, Luna and Liuz make their way to Hunter HQ and explain to the crew that she and the other 3 Reploids are new-gen Reploids, meant to allow Reploid kind to evolve and to procreate. The 4 of them, plus Breaking Boss, are the creations of Dr. Azuma. Each of them has a piece of the code that was meant to be utilized for this process. However, Breaking Boss was corrupted and became a Maverick. Their mission is to either destroy Breaking Boss or return him to his senses if at all possible. They ask if they could join the Hunters, which seems likely to give them the best chance of achieving either of those goals. After a few other Mavericks are defeated, a black armor clone of Zero appears and makes an open challenge to the Maverick Hunters. He is an optional fight, but fighting him is the only way to unlock Zero to be playable. If his challenge is accepted, you face him in the ruins of the virus area from Mega Man X5. This area is still heavily coated in the Zero virus, and bits of it will now be floating around in the other levels as you play. He fights very much like Nightmare Zero from X8, with less potent attacks. When he is defeated, he goes for a last-ditch attack to try to wipe out whoever his opponent is when Zero himself comes in and deals the final blow. Once the hunters leave the area, Nightmare Zero reconstitutes himself more powerful now in a purplish armor. As a side note, Zero can face and defeat Nightmare Zero himself right after this if the player so chooses. If not, you will fight him as a boss in the fortress area as Nightmare Zero working with Gate and Breaking Boss. Facing him earlier with Zero, he will be weaker. If you face him in the fortress, he will be much more powerful as he will be absorbing a lot of the Zero virus. Also, if you choose not to take on Black Zero, you will face him in place of Nightmare Zero in the fortress area, but he will basically be the same as the powered up Nightmare Zero because he will absorb large amounts of the Zero virus. However, when you defeat this Black Zero, he will immediately become Nightmare Zero and you'll have to face him for a second round. Also, once the Zero virus is unleashed and infecting the other stages, if you play as either Zero or Casshern a lot and absorb a lot of the Zero virus, and you leave Black or Nightmare Zero alive until the fortress levels, you can create a special situation. If you choose either Zero or Casshern, whom have absorbed massive quantities of the Zero virus, to fight and defeat Black and Nightmare Zero or Nightmare Zero, they will use a final burst of their energy to fully infect Zero or Casshern, creating either Awakened Zero or Maddened Casshern. You will have to choose a new character to replay the level and face them as the boss of the stage. If either Zero or Casshern is infected this way, they will not be playable for the rest of the game, even after they are defeated. That is, unless you take X to face Awakened Zero or Dio to face Maddened Casshern. Defeating them under these circumstances will allow them to be returned to their normal state. If you bring Zero to face Maddened Casshern or Casshern to face Awakened Zero, infected or not, they'll both end up taken out for the rest of the game after nearly destroying each other. If you do not bring an infected Zero or Casshern to this fight, meaning you haven't absorbed much of the Zero virus or any other playable characters, the last-ditch attack by Nightmare will only take them out of commission for the next level, as Douglas will take the time to repair them with Luna's help. The fortress level, that is basically Gates' home base, will have two mid-boss fights. One will be against Timax, the other against Vile. Unless you are playing as Alia, then she will face Gate in his base form first instead of Vile, and if Vile survives this level, then he will appear in the fortress level for Breaking Boss. He will follow behind Dynamo and Sophita as one of the level mid-bosses before you finally take on Breaking Boss himself. I did skip over one of the more important details here, and that's that instead of there only being 8 Maverick bosses to face, there will be 12. The 8 from Mega Man X6, as this is a split continuity, so they should still exist as part of Gates' research, and the 4 resurrected characters from Mega Man X4, being Magma Dragoon, Colonel, Iris, and Double. And there will be a special property for the X4 returns, as you will need to either be playing as X or Zero to permanently defeat them before the Fortress remaxes. X can destroy Dragoon, Colonel, and Double. Zero can destroy Dragoon, Colonel, and Iris. If they are slain before the Maverick rematches, there will be discolored clones of them in their place that have no dialogue, unlike the originals. Now, Vile, Dynamo, Hymax, and Sophita will act as mid-bosses for the Maverick stages before the Fortress levels. You will fight each of them twice before the Fortress levels are available to take on. Of these 4 characters, Vile is the only one that could potentially be destroyed before the Fortress levels take place. One of the boss specials will allow you to destroy him early, and then you won't see him again until the Fortress, with an upgraded state and an upgraded ride armor, making him tougher to defeat than he otherwise would be. So if you take out Vile on your first encounter with him, he won't reappear until either Gate or Breaking Boss's stages. If he is defeated by X, Zero, or Alia, he has some special dialogue for them in both scenarios. Vulcan and Mars also show up as mid-boss characters, but they only show up once during the Maverick stages and will appear together as the first boss of the Fortress level unless you defeat them as Casshern, Dio, or Lita during the Maverick levels. If they were defeated prior to the Fortress levels being unlocked, then you will fight a Zero virus possessed Jin in the first Fortress stage and have to fight him in 2 stages, base and then immediately again as he summons the parts from the destroyed Vulcan and Mars to protect him and become stronger. Defeating Jin returns him to his senses and allows him to live for any potential sequel that could be born from this crossover. I know this setup creates a lot of possible scenarios that a player could come across, and I think that is the key to replayability for this game. Creating what is essentially an alternative version of the Mega Man X6 and giving the Casshern characters a purpose that overwrites the events of Sins, but it stays true to them as characters and makes for a really interesting thought experiment. And for those curious about the fact that Isaac is missing from this, I think it would be worth it to save him for a potential follow-up, game. Being that he has an obsession with Zero, it would make for something interesting to see him actually be the big bad of a game himself. Something else to consider with this story, Sigma is no longer the main enemy following the events of X5. Breaking Boss takes its place, as when the last bits of Sigma infected him and attempted to take him over, Breaking Boss just fully absorbed Sigma and all of his knowledge, which is what makes him turn against humanity, but he still remains as himself. Sigma's energy was essentially fading out as he infected Breaking Boss, leaving him without the ability to actually take over. Being that Breaking Boss has all of Sigma's knowledge and pretty much all of his abilities on top of his own, this would be a cool scenario to actually follow and explore. Also, the baseline story situation doesn't mean that Axel couldn't be created. In fact, it could mean that he would be a more unique character because of him potentially being part of a small number of Reploids that can shapeshift into other Reploids. We could just consider it to be that research on Reploid procreation took the forefront over Reploids being able to copy each other. If I sit down and think about it, I could actually come up with a story beats that would still lead to his creation in a situation that requires him to find the Maverick Hunters. Maybe even have Isaac potentially trying to exploit Axel's power for himself as an upgrade. There are a bunch of options to explore, and I might just do that. So if people are interested in what would be the first direct follow-up crossover I do, please let me know. Though it obviously won't be the follow-up to this video because I'll need a little bit of time to think of the setup for that story and potential events. There are so many characters from Casshern Sins that haven't been introduced into this, as well as Casshern Robot Hunter characters that could also be converted for this, that it really does have so many possibilities that could be created. Mixing the two just makes a lot of sense, at least to me. But before I get too carried away, anyone who has played a good number of Mega Man games would know that there are usually 4 fortress stages. But with all of the stuff that I would be cramming into the fortress for the purpose of story and content, there would actually have to be 5. This is just so that things can be done and consistency can be kept for story beats without overloading the player with large 20-minute stages besides potentially the last level. So for the sake of the breakdown, the Fortress roster would be set up as follows. Fortress 1, Vulcan and Mars or Corrupted Jinn. Fortress 2, Black or Nightmare Zero, and potentially Awakened Zero or Maddened Casshern. Fortress 3, Maverick rematches. Fortress 4, Hymax, Vile or Base Gate and Battle Armor Gate. Fortress 5, Dynamo, Vile, if not in Fortress 4, Sophita, and Breaking Boss. I think that this just allows a much better spread for all of the events to be able to take place. I honestly think that this would be a game that would be a dream for people who enjoy games that have a lot of lore possibilities too. The speculation community would have a field day with this, especially on a lot of the Mega Man centric forums and content channels. Those are the things that I would like to see crop up from this if it were ever to happen, which the likelihood of that is almost absolutely zero. So before I close this out, the questions that I know would linger with some people. Dynamo, Sophita, and Breaking Boss would all survive this game and go on into the next, if there was one. Gate would die, but he has a special death sequence for if Alia is the one to defeat him. Even if Casshern or Zero is corrupted by the Zero virus and they have to be fought, they do survive the game, whether or not they are inaccessible after that fight. The X4 Mavericks do all die again in this game and have special death sequences for if they are defeated by X or Zero. Vulcan and Mars also have special dialogue for the Casshern characters if they are the ones to defeat them. They do die in this game either way. Jin also has special dialogue for Casshern specifically if he is defeated by him. But as stated, Jin does survive this game. Also in this game, Black Zero and Nightmare Zero are the same character. A portion of the Zero virus becomes a sentient being on its own and attaches itself to the cloned Zero body that Sigma had hidden away. After defeat, it reconstitutes itself from a single piece of the destroyed clone body, which is why it ends up having a color change that is more so akin to Zero than the clone body. Casshern is susceptible to the Zero virus because he is a Berserker mode, which Dio and Lita do not have. This is why too much corruption from the Zero virus will power him up in the same way that it does for Zero, and enough of it will cause the same type of corruption that happens with Zero. This is also why I decided that Infected Zero and Maddened Casshern, or Infected Casshern and Awakened Zero, will cancel each other out. It just makes sense narratively, but if there are any other questions that I haven't answered, please ask them and I'll do my best to explain what my thinking was with whatever decisions I've made. But now that I think about it, there was another thing that I realized I did forget to mention. Iris and Colonel can combine with each other and become an upgraded version of Iris called Another. Even though this character won't be an actual enemy in the main game, you can face off against her in what would be the available practice level. Facing another Iris when you first play the game would be different from after you have already completed it at least once. Fighting her without a completed game file, she'll use many of Colonel's attacks and fight patterns, but will also have some of Iris's defense drones that will pop out at you as you attack her. If you've already completed the game and have a save file for it, this version of Iris will destroy her battle arena to fight you with wider space and large-scale attacks that resemble that of the General from Mega Man X4. And as anyone could have guessed, defeating her with either X or Zero will have a special set of dialogue. This will also unlock a boss rush mode where you have to run the gauntlet of all the bosses in game. This means each version and variant that the game has to offer for the level bosses, mid bosses, fortress bosses, and the special bosses until they are all defeated. A lot of bang for your potential buck. So, with all of that said, I think it's time to bring this discussion to an end. At first glance, most people wouldn't see the many similarities that there are between the two worlds of Mega Man X and Casshern Sins, and those things are what make it worthwhile for this to be a discussion to be had in my mind. I had a very enjoyable time tying these two franchises together and thinking about the important bits of this video. I hope that you enjoyed listening to it and imagining the things I came up with for this. So thank you once again. Keep your eyes and ears out for more stuff from me, and until the next time, enjoy your games. Peace out, everybody. This is Andre the Game Idea Guy, and I'd like to thank you once again for tuning in. If you would be interested in supporting my efforts in content creation, please head on over to Amazon and look up The Game Idea Guy Presents Gaming Word Search, and you will find both Volume 1 and Volume 2 up for sale. Thank you very much once again, and I hope to be able to create more content for you in the future. Peace out.